Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a second submission by Yvon and her horse Wilco. I will say right off the bat here that I did see a lot of improvement in this tape over the last one, so just know that things are getting better for you. It takes a little time. This is about 2 months since we saw the last video. And a lot of the things that you were doing wrong in the last video, you corrected. And I do see quite a bit of improvement in him and his trot work when we get to the mounted work. So you've done a good job. It does take time to learn how to do this. And once again, it takes time to fully develop a horse. Once again, it doesn't matter whether you're starting with a horse that's 2 years old or one that's been going for 20 years. If they've never been worked over their back correctly, it's going to take about 2 years to put a foundation on a horse. That is, to develop the top line to the point that we can begin to develop collection. And once again, it seems to be about the same amount of time whether you start with a 2-year-old or a 15-year-old that's been going hollow its whole life. It seems to take about the same amount of time, about 2 years to put a top line on them. And of course, that's from the point at which we really get them to stretch into the contact. But while this horse isn't absolutely perfect all of the time, it's much improved over the last time I saw you. Now, the one thing I would say that I think you probably should consider with this horse, which might help you a bit, is to lunge him in a shambone a few days and just get him stretching a little deeper. That might help your stretch out a little bit more. Because I noticed in the last one, remember, he got down and stretched, but then he started to curl back a little bit. So the shambone can be a great way to go. It doesn't restrict the horse in any way. It just lets them stretch all the way down and out and encourages that. Whereas the side reins, when they start to stretch, we would like them to get longer all of a sudden, like I talked to you about in your last video. So the shambone might be a way for you to go with this horse just to get your stretches a little bit deeper. But I'm not too concerned about that. It's much improved over what it was. The thing for you to do is just get a little better idea how to get the full stretch when mounted, and I think you're going to be fine. But if you want to try the shambone, it might be a good way for you to go with the horse. But I'm already seeing a little more bounce off the ground with this horse. He looks more balanced. The hole behind the saddle has filled in a little bit since I saw you 2 months ago. The muscling is looking better. His abdominal muscles look a little more engaged. He's got a little more spring in his trot. And most importantly, you're keeping him in a good frame and a good rhythm to help him develop. Whereas in the last video we saw you're kind of lunging him, not lunging him, but running him a little bit too much under saddle, which was causing him to lose his back. So remember, the faster you go, a horse is a very big animal. So inertia, it's like a freight train. When you try to slow them down, they get so much movement. And actually, if they're going too fast, that will just drive them right onto their forehand. So we have to be very careful about that. But as I said, everything is improving here. I do see him swishing his tail a little bit. Actually, it's a little less, I think, in this one than it was in the last one. Now, what that's all about, as you said, he's out on grass all the time, and he might be a little gassy, that sort of thing. I would have your saddle fit checked just to be sure that there's nothing interfering anywhere, that sort of thing. And but basically, I don't see that as a problem. He's not angrily swishing his tail the way we see horses in the show ring that are just jammed against the bridle. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Once again, the trot itself is looking better here, even here on the lunge line. Now, while I would like it to be a little deeper, but it's already starting to show more balance. He's got a little more spring in his step. That is, he's lifting himself into the air a little bit more. But he does need to stretch more deeply and more consistently. And once again, I think you're on the right track to getting there. It'll be great to see you when you come out here in June. We'll be able to give you a lot better idea, and you'll be able to see lots of horses working this way and experience some of those, which will help you a great deal in your own work. So once again, this lunge line work is looking quite good. I would like to see him stretching a little deeper, but there it goes. Now it's starting to look really nice. It's getting a little deeper into it. Now we can still see the bottom of his neck muscles are engaged, and that's what we want to see disappear. But that's way better than it was the last time just starting off. So he's already starting to soften that underside of his neck a little bit. So remember, whenever you see a horse that's ewe-necked, even horses that have been forced over in the neck, by using draw reins and things like this, when we take the draw reins off, we see that the underside of the neck is all developed. Because basically, if you don't engage the horse's back, you can pull the horse's head over, but all it will do is end up pulling with its shoulders, which is what we see so much in these upper-level dressage horses these days, where their necks are pulled back into the body and they're throwing their front legs out, but the hind legs aren't coming through. I also like his walk a little better today. It's a little more active and stepping more regularly. And that little tail swishing I'm seeing there, that doesn't look like much to me. That's not like angry tail swishing, as I said before. You know, you can always spend plenty of time in the walk, letting him stretch down. That's the beauty of the walk, is that we can do a lot of it. So feel free to spend lots of time in the walk, getting him stretching, always with all the horses that we work. Walk is really one of the most important gaits, and it's so often left out by people who don't understand how horses develop. And if you leave out the walk, you're leaving out a wonderful opportunity to explain things, as Mr. Oliveira used to say. The walk is where we explain everything to the horse. So once we get into the trot and canter, things are coming very fast, and it's very hard to communicate if you haven't established that communication in the walk first. But I like how you're lunging. You're doing a good job of keeping the line consistent. You're whipping the correct place and yourself at the top of a triangle created by your line and your whip. And once again, that's a pretty nice walk right there. Now you can also see, it's quite clearly, if you keep watching horses out and you see how he lifted his head there a little bit, how all of a sudden the hind leg didn't continue to step as nicely as it had. There you go. Now that's starting to look better there. There, like that. That's what we're looking for. And you see how he drops that head down, how we get that little more sense of suspension all of a sudden in his gaze. That is, he's lifting himself a little more. Once again, remember that the head and neck has nothing to do with whether a horse is on the forehand or not. It's quite the opposite of how people think. You know, most people, they see the neck down, they think the horse is on the forehand because they're not looking at how the body is moving. So once again, every horse always has to stretch first to get over its back, and then when the back develops and the withers pull up through the shoulders, the horse becomes more uphill, and it can more naturally track underneath its body, that being the point of correct development. That's why we see so few horses correctly collected today, is because people don't spend enough time. Everybody's in a big hurry. Everybody wants to be a Grand Prix rider today, even if they've only been riding for 3 months, it seems like. And unfortunately, the show ring has not helped, in that the scores have encouraged people to keep going up through the levels when they're not fulfilling the requirements at the levels they're at. And that's what led to so many upside down horses in the Grand Prix ring. And things like people trying to get the walk taken out of Grand Prix, because if you force a horse into a frame to get these sort of nervous piaffe and passages and things, they're never going to have a good walk. So that should be the first thing you look at. You know, if a Grand Prix horse can't walk, there's something seriously wrong with the way you're going about your so-called dressage work. Now, once again, this canter work here is not bad. I keep it to a minimum. I wouldn't say he's hollowing. There you go. That's pretty good. He actually gets into a pretty good frame there in that. And when you come back, the trot's a little active. And that's just the thing, is don't too much of that canter. Keep it to very small periods like you just did there, a couple of times around. That's enough, and come back and get him back stretching again. Because you want to get to the point where you can stretch the horse in all 3 gaits. And ultimately, we want to be able to do that without even side reins or anything else on. Once the horse really gets stretching over his back, which you're not quite there yet, but you're certainly better than you were, we find that we don't need anything at all on them. So once again, that was interesting kind of in that trot work. Now, I don't know if it was, now I told you to lengthen the side reins at the point at which the horse starts to stretch. Now, one thing you might want to do there, if you're continuing with the side reins, and once again, as I said before, you might want to try the shambone on this horse. It might help him a great deal. But if you stick with the side reins, I would start them the way you started them before, and once he starts to relax and stretch, then stop and lengthen them. And I think you'll probably get there a little quicker. But once again, that was not bad. He shows more lift in the trot. It was a steadier, more rhythmic trot than I saw before, less running. But in the previous video, actually, because your reins were a little bit shorter, I don't want to confuse you here, he actually got stretching, but that's the point at which you want to lengthen them. So you might want to try just starting with them a little shorter, kind of the way you had them in your last video, but then as soon as you see him starting to stretch, then lengthen them. So once again, getting back to this walk here that we're starting out with, this is not bad. He needs to stretch deeper once again, kind of look at the muscles in the neck, and you can see how the neck is kind of turtled a little bit. That is, he's pulling it back into his body a little bit and shortening the neck. And we want to get that stretching deeper than that. And we can also see as he comes around there, you know, his belly hasn't entirely pulled up. He's still got a little bit that distension through his abdominal muscles there a little bit, but it improves as we go, so that's the important thing. And I do think he looks better. Now that's getting to be a better walk there. It's starting to swing out. So remember, the whole trick, so to speak, if you want to think of that, in getting horses to stretch is simply giving at the moment that the horse seeks downward. We never take enough contact that we try to pull the horse's mouth or head and neck into any kind of frame by pulling. What we do is simply have just slightly more contact than the weight of the rein. And that's always not a consistent contact, but a giving and taking soft, kind of pliable contact. And as soon as we feel the horse going down, we lighten that contact even more. So as he stretches down, he learns to seek that super light contact where it's just the weight of the rein, because that's the ultimate goal. If we keep pulling against a horse's mouth all the time, it's never going to develop correctly. So, and it's never going to be a happy horse because you're always punishing it. If you're pulling back, even to the point of somebody wrote me the other day saying you should have 5 pounds in your hands. Well, that's the most ridiculous thing. These ideas of how many pounds you're supposed to hold in your hand. 5 pounds, believe me, is quite a bit. Try, get a weight at the gym sometime and see how much 5 pounds actually is in your hand, which would be way too much in the mouth of a horse. You would be punishing the horse all the time. There you go. Now you're getting a good stretch. And that seems to be what you're doing. That is simply as he releases down, tries to release, you release with him. So he's instantly rewarded for that seeking the bit downwards. And of course, that's how we reward them, is not doing anything. In other words, the cessation of the aids. So that got to a pretty good place in the walk there. I would like to have seen you gone a little further and done more lateral work and that sort of thing and gotten him a little bit deeper. But that was getting to a good point there when you stop. So don't stop so soon. Do a little more of that. Now, coming back to this trot, this is already a much better trot than I saw in the last video. It's much steadier. It's slower, but it's more engaged. And while he's not stretched all the way down yet, he's stretched enough that they're going to be able to help him here. So that's a good thing. Now, once again, we would like to stretch to get a little bit deeper, but this is really good. I mean, this will lead to that. And I think you have the right idea. I would have just spent more time at the walk getting it longer, but this is quite good here. And certainly, while it's not all the way down there, it's enough that he's starting to work over his back quite nicely. The swing is better. The suspension is better in his gait than in the last video that I saw. And once again, in the last video, you were running him a bit off his feet a lot, and this time you're not doing that, and that's really good. So once again, it takes quite a while. You don't want to try to do any lengthenings at all until you get the horse completely over its back. Once you get the horse completely over its back and really stretching into the contact, then we can begin to start lengthenings. But if you tried it lengthenings before the horse has gotten over its back, all it's going to do is run faster and push its weight onto his forehand. Once again, as I talked about before, that idea of inertia, driving the weight of the horse onto its forehand. So finding the right speed, which I think you have done today, this is really, really good and a much better pace than we went at the last time. And I love how you're just keeping contact there. Your reins a little bit wide, and that's perfectly fine, there. And that starts to stretch a little deeper. And actually, you kept in quite nice there as you made that change of across the direction there. Change of rein, I should say. Good rhythm here. Once again, that little swishing doesn't look like much to me. Most of the time is actually quite good, so it doesn't look like angry swishing, so that's a good thing. Now, I like how you're keeping your upper body up right there. Now, that's starting to look really good. Now, once again, this trot looks so much better than the last time I saw it. I think with little patience here, you're going to get there without any problem. This is really going to be a nice horse. Really good there. Once again, that's enough. Now, we would like to get him stretching deeper, yes, but he's enough over his back here that you're going to be helping him with this work. Really nice there. Good rhythm. Not too fast. So once again, always remembering that's the idea. So if he's not on the bridle, he's not stretching into the contact, rather, we don't want to try to force it or force. We never take so much contact that we're trying to pull the horse's neck into some position. It's just slightly more than the weight of the rein is all it takes to get a horse to stretch. And then when they stretch into that light contact, then we simply develop them. That's all there is to it. And as the horse develops, the head and neck, the withers will pull up through the shoulders, and the head and neck will start to raise all by itself. It takes about 2 years, once again, for that process to happen, no matter what age the horse is, from the time you get it starting to work over its back. So once again, that was a good trot work there. It could be deeper, but it was good enough that you're making improvement in the horse. I think we're going to get it deeper and deeper all the time. So this is a better walk you're coming back to here, like this, how it's stretching down. And that's perfectly okay. I tend to work through the gears and then come back to the walk and be done. But it depends on the horse. If the horse, when I'm just starting a young horse and they feel like they can't sustain it or are getting a little tired, then come back to the walk and let them stretch. And we should certainly have many periods of stretching throughout every horse's workout, no matter what level they are. Someone else told me the other day that they took a clinic and the person came and told them that they never wanted to see the horse in a training level frame again. Well, that's ridiculous, because a horse that's correctly trained, you can go, a training level frame simply means it's in working gaits, that it hasn't begun to collect yet. So that means, but working gaits imply and mean that the horse is working over its back. So again, good here. I like how you're not trying to force it, you're just keeping contact. And you're getting the stretch a little deeper each time. Once again, we're going to see this horse's belly still pull up much, much more, and we're going to see that hole fill in behind the saddle. It has done quite a bit since I saw the last video, so it's much improved. But as I was saying, perfectly good to come back to the walk a few times throughout. Whenever you lose it, just back up a step. The biggest mistake people make when training horses, they run into a wall, so to speak. They encounter something that they can't do, that the horse can't do, and instead of going back to what came before it, they tend to try to work, fight their way through, and that never leads to anything but an unhappy horse. So when you find the horse can't do something, you back up. In other words, are you feeling getting tired and losing his back? We always want to go a little bit longer than the horse wants to go, and then just let him come back to a walk like you did there, and certainly you can have plenty of time periods throughout your workout. Once again, this is a pretty nice balanced trot. It's not stretched as much as we would like it, but it's an improvement over the trot I saw last time. And once again, it's good enough that it will help him develop, and your stretch is going to get deeper and deeper through this. Really nice there. That's starting to get into a better place there. Now, I know by the end of this, because of course I've watched this before I'm talking about it, you get him to a really nice place. So there you go. Now that's starting to look even better there. And once again, remember, we never want to shorten the horse's neck. That's not what collection is, not pulling the horse's neck back into the body, as so many people today seem to think it is. Every horse has a different conformation, so their position of their head and neck has to be in, even in collection, is very different. This horse does not have a particularly high headset or big sloping shoulder, where the neck comes straight out and up, like some of these $1 million horses do, that have perfect conformation. But once again, even with the horses with perfect conformation, it's almost a downfall for the horses, because they get rushed into these frames so much younger because it's easier to get a false frame from them to start with. But the problem is they still fall apart just like every other horse. Is why we see so many of these upper level horses lame all the time and being retired at such a young age. As I said, once again, it used to be that horses, went through their careers and then they became school horses and stayed sound for years and years after that. Now, by the time horses get done in the show ring, their legs are so completely shot, that basically they're either turned out or put down. And that's a really sad thing, because too many people are not getting the opportunity to ride real schoolmasters. And that's the hardest thing. If you've never been on a correctly trained horse with its back up, you're going to have a very different idea of what it's supposed to be. Now, this is looking really good here. I like how he's starting to drop there a little bit. And once again, your rhythm in this video has been so good. You've never been running him. He has a really much more balanced look to him this time out than I saw the last time. And a little high there. Once again, he could be stretching deeper into that. And that's okay. You tried a little serpentine there. I think that's what you were doing there. And it's perfectly fine. You try something different, and if he gets a little hollow in it, you come back and reestablish what you did before. Once again, reestablishing the back every time you lose it is what guides our training. So every time you do something that tends to hollow him a little bit, when you try lengthening or try a canter or whatever the case may be, and you lose that connection over the back, we just come back and reestablish that before we can go on and try anything else. Once again, pretty good in that change of rein, pretty good change of bend there, so to speak. Though remember, a horse is never going to bend very much until it lifts its back. And remember, when we talk about bend, we're talking about the middle of the horse's back. So the horse can't bend until it lifts its back, because when the back is down, those vertebrae are locked, and it makes it very, very hard. That's why we see so many people very frustrated, and why we see a lot of, or very few, upper level horses that can actually bend. which is also why if you watch the half passes in the upper level horses that are hollow, you'll see that they can barely get their legs through, that is cross over, without popping their knees together or their hocks together, because that's what happens when a horse is hollow, and that's how the horse's legs get damaged. So while there is nothing better in the world for a horse than correct dressage, there's almost nothing worse for them than bad dressage. Or so we just call it bad riding, because it isn't dressage. Horse is hollow, you are not doing dressage. You're just doing, one or another forms of bad riding. But I like how you come back to the walk here once again. That's really a great thing. Come back once again. We still like to see him a little deeper, but if time you come back, it's a little more relaxed. That was a nice upwards transition out of the walk to canter. He did that well enough that you can do it. So that's perfectly fine. Different horses, I see about, 1 in 100 horses canters better than it trots. And this is really quite nice. His canter is over his back here. This is good. Don't see any problem with this. Quite nice. I sure love his attitude working amongst all those horses out there. It's great. Really nice canter work, so that's good. That can be done to advantage. So once again, if your horse is too hollow, then you can't do much cantering, or any at all, until you get the horse. And once again, if it's not, this horse is about halfway there over its back. You're getting some really good stuff. It needs to get a little bit deeper, but you're going to get there. But what you're doing is no longer, it's all going to be in the right direction, so to speak. Whereas when I saw the last video, you were doing a lot of lengthenings that the horse couldn't do, and kind of running him off his feet here and there, and trying things that the horse really wasn't ready to do. So this is a much more appropriate workout that you've done this time. And I really like how you're just keeping that contact. You're doing a really good job of learning to keep that consistent contact. And that will lead to you getting more fully over his back and stretching deeper into the contact. And once again, not a bad canter transition. That was good enough that's good enough to be able to do it. He lifted himself up quite nicely, even if he did hollow a little bit in the beginning. As he started the canter, see how he kind of pulled his head up in the air and hollowed a little bit. But once you got him going, he canters pretty nicely over his back. So once again, he canters well enough that you can do this to advantage. And I love how you're giving the reins and just encouraging that stretch. That's really good. And even in those downwards transitions, while that wasn't a perfect transition, that's really the better way to go. Because if you feel like he's a little out of balance, just let him come back any way you can, because you don't want to get in a fight with him. One of the biggest things that I see inexperienced or uneducated trainers trying to do is forcing people to have these horses in perfect frames in transition. So once again, never worry about the transitions between the gaits until the horse is really over its back in the gaits. So once you have him really over his back, then you can begin to worry about, in fact, you won't have to worry about it, because the difficulty will just disappear all by itself. Whereas a horse that's hollow is always going to be, even like with this one, it's always going to want to hollow when you change or try to hold it against the bridle, so to speak. As you saw with him in that last canter transition, he kind of threw his head a little bit, but you didn't fight with him, and then once you got into the canter, you were able to get it right. Now, this is the best trot we've seen yet. That was looking really good there. There, and the neck is getting a little bit longer here. So as I said in the beginning, he looks a little bit like he wants to turtle a little bit. That is to pull his neck back into his body. But this is starting to look a little longer here. And you get him to a really good place here by the end. So once again, it's not so much, it's where you finish every day that makes the difference about where you get to ultimately. So, if it takes you the entire session to get him all the way there where you want him to be, that's perfectly all right. There, now that's starting to swing really nicely. And once again, of course, once you get the best thing you get, you always want to stop. The cardinal rule of classical dressage is whenever the horse has done something better than it's done before, even if you just started the workout and you're 10 minutes into it, just quit. And if you come out and you get this amazing walk out of him, we're up underneath his back and you've never had it before, stop with that. Don't keep going until you lose it. That's the biggest mistake I see people making, is they're working horses way too hard. Like, all this stuff with people injecting their horses, if a horse if it's running out of joint fluid, it should be telling you that you're working the horse too hard. You're wearing out its legs. So, it really doesn't take hours to train a horse. So once again, if you're training for endurance or something, once you have a horse correctly over its back, then you can build up the length of time, that you spend on the horse, which you can. But in the beginning, once again, when we're teaching horses, that most important thing that they understand when they have done the job correctly. So stopping when they have is the most important thing. Once again, as I said, even if that's only 10 minutes into your workout or 2 minutes into your workout, suddenly the horse is better than it's ever been. It does something, reward him and put him up, because that's what you're trying to get them to do, is to learn to come out, stretch, and get over their backs. Then we build everything else from that. And same thing there, if you come out and have a better trot, even if you were planning to do a bunch of canter work on a particular day and you come out, wow, the trot's better than it's ever been, stop with that. You don't have to run all 3 gears every day. That's also a big misconception with people. When we're training horses, it's all about, getting that consistency of working over the back each day. And once again, this horse is trot. He's swinging quite nicely together now, better than he was in the last video that I saw, that his hind leg is swinging in unison with the front legs much better, which tells me he's better over his back. And there, now that's starting to look quite nice. And once again, he's got a little more lift in the trot. Here we go. Now that's looking nice. Now see how the under neck at that last part there, his neck got a little bit longer, and that's what we're looking to happen. We saw the underside of the neck, even for just a moment, completely relaxed. There, it's getting longer there. That's so much better. There, now that little bit when you change the rein right there, that was really good. So if you can get that much, it won't be long before you're getting the whole thing. That's really good there. And once again, I don't care that you get it for the whole session. Ultimately, that's our goal. But when you're training and you're trying to learn at the same time, but you can see the beauty of the classical system there, right there. That's starting to look really nice, because not only is he developing, but you're not causing a lot of problems, but you yourself will be developing, because you're not holding on. If you're holding 5 pounds of pressure against the horse's mouth, you're balancing on the horse's mouth. So you're never going to really learn to ride. You're never going to really be in balance. Now that's beautiful right there. So we get to a really good place by the end of this. And once again, look at the difference in the underside of his neck here. Now that's beautiful. That's what we want right there. Now that's fantastic. So once again, if you can get this after a 30-minute session, and pretty soon you'll be able to get it. I would have spent more time in the walk than you did on this video, and get him a little deeper in the walk before you go to the trot, and that should solve that problem somewhat. But you're really doing a great job with him. Those last few moments there were really nice. And once again, as I said, remember, if you get it better than ever, even if for a few strides, like here, just bring him back to a walk, because you're about to end this too. But then, so you do that correctly. Get it as best it can be and quit before it all starts to fall apart. Once again, the biggest problem most people have is they override their horses. Yes, certainly there might be a few horses out there that need, more joint fluid than they make because of some, dietary thing or whatever, genetic problem. But that's really very, very, very few. If your horse needs injections, you're overriding it and just wearing it out in the wrong way is what we see. So too often veterinarians these days are way too happy, to take your money and inject every bone in the horse's body instead of tell you, that this kind of work should be part of every veterinarian's, and the veterinarians that I work with, it is part of their education, and they understand it, and they tell people why their horses are going lame instead of just putting band-aids on the problems. That's a real veterinarian who really cares about the animals, not just making his house payment. Really, really, I was fortunate enough in my life to grow up with some really, really great veterinarians, and who really cared and really understood it. So I got an education early on on what a good vet is, and it's made a big difference in my life and will in yours as well. Really good here. Now we're getting into a really good stretch. And once again, look how much nicer that bottom part of the neck looks. So really great job here. Once again, you might want to try the sham bone, but everything's coming along great here. A little shorter in the side range to start, and then lengthen him once he starts to stretch, but you got to a really good place, and it's much improved. I look forward to seeing you at our place here in June.